Hello everyone. What if I told you that one of the greatest losses in human history wasn't the destruction of a kingdom or the fall of an empire, but the loss of knowledge? Not gold, not jewels, not armies, knowledge. And that knowledge once lived inside a university called Nalanda, a place where scholars traveled from across Asia, not to trade, not to conquer, but to learn. Today, when people talk about Nalanda, they often focus on how it was destroyed. But perhaps the most important question is this: what exactly was lost? Let's find out. Imagine standing in India nearly 1500 years ago, long before modern universities, long before printed books, long before the internet. Knowledge was copied by hand, one page at a time, one manuscript at a time. Each book required enormous effort. Each manuscript represented years of work, sometimes generations of work, and many existed in only a single copy. If that copy was destroyed, the knowledge disappeared forever. This was the world in which Nalanda flourished. Founded around the 5th century CE, Nalanda became one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. Thousands of students lived there. Hundreds of teachers taught there. Visitors came from China, Korea, Tibet, Sri Lanka, and many other regions. Among them was the most famous Chinese monk, Xuanzang. His detailed records would later become one of the most valuable sources describing Nalanda. Without his writings, much of its history might have disappeared completely. Many people believe Nalanda taught only Buddhism, but the university was far more diverse. Students studied philosophy, logic, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, grammar, languages, politics, metaphysics, and religious traditions from multiple schools of thought. Nalanda was not only merely a monastery, it was a knowledge network, a research center, a library system, and perhaps the closest thing the ancient world had to a modern university. At the heart of this institution stood its greatest treasure, the library, known as Dharmaganja. The Treasury of Knowledge. Historical records describe multiple library buildings. Among them, Ratnasagara, Ratnodadi, and Ratnaranjaka. These were not ordinary libraries. They contained manuscripts collected across centuries, palm leaf texts, scholarly commentaries, research works, translations, philosophical debates, scientific observations, medical knowledge, regional scriptures, and writings from scholars whose names are not forgotten. Now comes the most fascinating part. What books were actually inside? The truth is, we don't have a complete catalogue. No surviving inventory exists, and that is exactly why historians find Nalanda so intriguing. We know fragments, we know references, we know what later scholars quoted, but we don't know everything, and perhaps we never will. What we do know is that Nalanda possessed extensive collection of Buddhist literature. Some of the most important works of Mahayana Buddhism were studied there. Texts connected to the Prajnaparamita tradition. Works discussing emptiness, consciousness, compassion, logic, and enlightenment. Some of these teachings survive today only because copies reached to Tibet and China before Nalanda's destruction. Without these copies, entire branches of Buddhist philosophy might have vanished. The university also preserved works by some of the greatest thinkers in Asian history: Nagarjuna, Dharmakirti, Dignaga, Shantideva. These scholars influenced philosophy across Asia. Their writings explored questions that still fascinate philosophers today. What is reality? How do we know something is true? What is consciousness? What is the nature of the self? Some answers survived, others may have lost forever. But Nalanda was not only about religion and philosophy. Ancient records suggest extensive study of mathematics and astronomy. India has already produced remarkable thinkers such as Aryabhatta. His work transformed mathematical and astronomical understanding. Nalanda likely preserved copies, commentaries, and teaching materials related to these traditions. Imagine centuries of observations, calculations, corrections, and discussions. Some may have survived elsewhere, others may have disappeared in the flames. Medicine was another major field. Texts connected to Ayurveda were studied and copied. Students learned about diagnosis, herbal treatment, human anatomy, surgery, disease classification, and public health. How much of this knowledge survived? We don't fully know, but historians agree that many unique commentaries and teaching texts almost certainly vanished. Language and grammar were equally important. The ancient Indian tradition of linguistics was among the most sophisticated in the world. Scholars studied Fanini's grammar, phonetics, logic, translation techniques, and multiple scripts. Nalanda served as a bridge between cultures. Texts moved from Sanskrit into Tibetan, from India into China, and across Asia. It was not merely storing knowledge, it was exploring it. Then came the late 12th century. Political turmoil spread across northern India. Around 1193 CE, forces led by Bhaktiya Khilji attacked Nalanda. Historical accounts describe destruction across the university complex. Buildings were damaged, monks were led, libraries burned, and centuries of accumulated knowledge disappeared. Many stories claim that library burned for weeks. Some says months. Whether every detail is accurate remains debated. But the scale of loss is not. What was destroyed was enormous, not because of the number of books alone, but because each manuscript was unique. This was not a world of printing press. A lost manuscript could mean a lost idea forever. And here lies the greatest mystery. Perhaps the most important books destroyed at Nalanda are the books we have never heard of, the books that were never copied, never translated, never quoted, never referenced again. Ideas that entered history and then vanished. Entire intellectual traditions may have disappeared without leaving a trace. Yet not everything was lost. As Nalanda declined, some scholars carried manuscripts into Tibet and Nepal. There they were translated, copied, preserved, and protected. Today, many surviving Nalanda traditions exist inside Tibetan collections. Ironically, some knowledge that originated in India survived only because it left India. Modern scholars are still working to recover this legacy. Researchers compare Tibetan translations with surviving Sanskrit fragments. Lost texts were being reconstructed. Ancient ideas are being rediscovered, and pieces of Nalanda continue to return after centuries of silence. Today, the ruins of Nalanda still stand, quiet, ancient, and incomplete. Visitors walk through the remains of classrooms and monasteries, but the greatest loss is invisible. Not the buildings, not the walls, not the bricks, the ideas, the manuscripts, the questions, and the answers that may never be known. When people remember Nalanda, they often remember a university that was destroyed, but perhaps it should be remembered for something else. For proving that knowledge can travel across continents, for bringing together scholars from different cultures, and for reminding us that preserving knowledge may be one of the civilization's most important responsibilities. Because once knowledge disappears, it may never return. And somewhere among the lost manuscripts of Nalanda, there may still be discoveries humanity has yet to discover. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into one of the greatest centers of learning in human history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more fascinating stories about history, science, civilization, and the forgotten chapters of our past. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.